Welcome to the Product Quest podcast. Thank you for joining us on our journey to better understand innovation and product strategy. My name is Jan Vermut, and joining me as always are my co-hosts Scott Burleson and Jonathan Edwards. I'm excited about today because we get to talk to someone who wrote the book I immediately fell in love with for its clarity and charming critique of what is going wrong in large organizations and the digital space. Top Tasks. Today, we talk to Gerry McGovern. He has developed Top Tasks, which is a design framework that helps identify what truly matters to people. It has been developed over a 15-year period and applied more than 500 times by companies like Microsoft, Cisco, Toyota, and governmental organizations such as the European Union and, of course, the Irish government and the WHO. Gerry is a highly regarded speaker and has proven it in more than 40 countries around the world. He appeared on CNN, the BBC, and various other media. He has written 8 books, of which I strongly recommend, of course, I mentioned it already, the Top Tasks, a how-to guide, and another one, Transform, a rebel's guide for digital transformation, and of course, his latest one called Worldwide Waste, how digital is killing the planet and what to do about it. A lot of today will be about, I think, designing information and that structure, but I think there's so much in here that we can learn for the innovation business as well. So, Gerry, thanks a lot and welcome to the Product Quest podcast.
Oh, and thank you for inviting me to this chat. Yeah, I'm very happy to be here.
Perfect. So to start, I mentioned it before, I have to start quoting from your book, and it would be nice to get a little bit, kind of start there and get a little bit into and what Top Tasks is. But I mean, that introduction, the first chapter, why Top Tasks? I mean, it just blew me away again for its clarity and charming critique, as it were. And in there is a couple of sentences that I just want to read. So here it goes. It goes like, organizations need to make things simple today, really simple. They need to understand their customer much better. The design of their products must be genuinely intuitive, so simple, even a distracted adult can understand it. The truth is that organizations love complexity, verbosity, and glut. Giving a website, I'm tempted here to add an innovation lab, but anyway, giving a website to an organization is like giving a pup to an alcoholic. And I just love that image. Can you explain a little bit where this is coming from? Because I 100% agree, and I love the image that you're giving here.
Well, I think we face, and we've been talking about it for a long time in some ways, for the last 20 years, a true information overload, that our capacity to create information and data vastly outstrips our capacity to organize it. And we have excelled in tools of production and publication, and much of the digital industry or ecosystem is actually based on encouraging us to create and to store, whether it's the free models or otherwise of free products, or the data center models. A lot of them begin with, well, you've got X amount of free storage, but they're very much based on getting us beyond that point of free storage into the premium landscape. So that you often will find that if you want to remove stuff from Gmail accounts or it's very, very difficult. And that's a deliberate design decision to actually, create this world that is constantly expanding, and with some belief in there that some value will be mined from it. But really, what we are doing is creating massive mountains of waste. It's estimated that only 5% of data in a data center is actively managed. So the other 95%, after about 3 months, it's never going to be looked at again. And the consequences of that and the phenomenal growth of data are very significant, not just for organizational behavior, but for the climate, because data centers are now becoming a key consumer of electricity and water and other resources.
Yeah, that's a key concern of yours, and I've seen you mention this more and more, and of course the latest book is about this, and I would love to touch upon this again and again later on, because it is a real problem. And I think it's so right. I mean, also just the pure data that organizations have, many of them have, piles and piles of all the data you can imagine, but most of them don't do anything with it. Also don't know what to do with it, and there is no real purpose behind it. But somehow collecting data seems to be inherently something good, or that's at least a belief in some sense. I don't know.
That's a belief, and that's fed by the tech industry, of which I've been a part of for 30 years. I mean, the selling of content management systems or data management systems has always been about production and storage, so to speak, at the vaguest level, and that in essence you just need to buy the new content management system, and somehow that will solve your content management problem. Yet these are oxymorons when they come to names. It's rare that I've found a content management system that actually helps you manage content. But it's really tapping into it. It often strikes me that humans, modern humans, are very intelligent but very unwise. That we behave as so-called primitive people would never behave. We are incredibly slovenly in the way we work, and we create wireframes and do all sorts of, and then we just move on to the next project. The amount of waste that we leave behind us in the digital ecosystem, the amount of times you'd go into a sales management system and an intranet and see 90 versions of the same sales PowerPoint, and nobody will ever go back or return. There seems like in some ways technology is making humans more lazy or more stupid. There's less information architecture skills today, in my experience, than there was 20 or 25 years ago. Because the hope is, the AI will solve it for us. We always believe there's a new technology just about to appear that's going to clean up the mess, but the mess keeps getting bigger.
Yeah, 100% agree. So a lot of what I believe, and we can get into more detail, top task is about, but also, I think your general thrust, let's say, in what you write and publish is making things simpler. What can you really take away and really leave out? So what's the importance of making stuff simpler, and how does that kind of relate to customer understanding?
Well, if you have let's say 100 objects, 1,000 objects, and 950 of them are waste, and you index that in a search engine, you try and create an architecture out of that from an information architecture, you've essentially created an information architecture of waste, you've created a search engine of waste, because you've only got 50 things that really matter out of the 1,000 in the process. So what we often end up doing is creating structures that allow the waste to rise to the top rather than the cream, because you essentially overload search environments, certainly internal search environments or internet search environments, by just poorly structured content and multiple versions of a product document that nobody has taken away. So over time, the waste overwhelms everything else. There's an old saying, what do you get when you cross a fox with a chicken? You get a fox, because the fox eats the chicken, and you can imagine the fox as being, in, say, information management senses, what should be the archive, and the chicken is the website. If you don't separate the fox and the fox eats the chicken, the website becomes the archive, and you can find nothing, because everything is being stored in the actual environment. So we have less and less skills to actually organize. I remember talking to somebody who was in the army, and I think it was the British Army. He was a senior officer, a corporal, or some high rank at the time I was talking to him. And he says when he was a young officer in the 70s, and he was just getting appointed to his position, they sent him on a course, a 3-day course, and the course was managing my filing cabinet. How to organize his filing cabinet.
Yeah.
And then he said in the 80s, when he got another promotion, didn't do that course anymore because now he had a computer. So the idea was that when you had this physical filing cabinet, you needed the skills of how to create tabs, what to call them, how to structure the top of your filing cabinet a second. But he says, now I've got 100 filing cabinets and they don't give me any training. So they're inherent with modern technology was the assumption that either you would learn organizational skills and architectural skills just by using the device, or that you really didn't need them anymore because the characteristics of the device, the search components, were so good that we no longer need to organize. And I think we've never needed more to actually organize than we do today. And of course, we see the companies that do organize well. We see, I started using Google in 1990, whenever it came out, very, very soon after it came out and whatever. And they are the essence of, see what you get when you organize stuff.
Yeah.
And we look at Amazon, what was their first product? Books. And why did they choose products? Because there was an already existing information architecture there, and they have been relentlessly focused, for good or ill, on information architecture sense. So the companies that are really dominating the digital landscape are extremely good at information architecture.
Yeah.
Google then focused on maps and all about structure and organizing information. And people have missed that point so badly in so many organizations.
I feel for me, this is like, I can immediately relate this to also the business of innovation, where I'm more in, where we also have this, it translates into what you're saying, it translates also into the front end. You can see this on, you can get a feel of this when you look at certain websites. We don't have to name them, but you can look at websites, and it's just, it's 1,000 different things that you can find. Well, find there is exactly the hard part, but that are on there. And I think a lot of innovation is, or at least similar to it. We add a product feature, we add another product feature, and we do this 100 times until we don't actually know what's going on.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to how do you weigh things? How do you decide what matters and what doesn't? And maybe here kind of top task comes in.
Well, that's part of it. And Jan, maybe you'll hate me for this as well, but I think we need to really seriously look at innovation and what is actually behind it, or what it has become, because it has become more what you have just described, a kind of a features arms race in the process. And a lot of the stuff we need to know today is common knowledge for hundreds of years. I mean, if we want to solve the climate crisis, we don't need AI to churn through massive quantities of data. We need to start walking more. We need to start cycling more. We need to create cities that are livable and walkable. We don't need AI to tell us this stuff. I mean, the most profound things that we need to know today have been known for thousands of years. And us modern humans are so bored with the past, so bored with anything that's more than 2 weeks old, that we constantly have to get the new thing in the process. And it's like, going back to that earlier analogy of giving an organization the web is like giving an alcoholic a pub. We have become addicted to speed. Digital, the inherent characteristic of digital is speed and a type of fragility as well that exists within digital. And we have become speed addicts. And it's not good for us, and it's not good for the environment. And it's not, it is a recipe for the extinction of the human species. I think, if we look at look at innovation, human innovation in the last 300 or 400 years. We've done nothing in the last 50 years. What have we done for all our computers and all our, what big breakthroughs really can humanity wave their hands about in the last 50 years? Like, not practically nothing of significance, like electricity or the railways, or really big breakthroughs of antibiotics, or what, the iPhone, or and most of the iPhone was government fund, was the result of 40 years of government funding. All the core components of the iPhone, so we can make a phone vibrate. Is that what we say? That's what can we really say we've done in the last 50 years that is truly transformative? Have we built better planes? We're still flying around in 60s planes. We're not nearly as clever as we think we are, but we're really good at pretending we're doing loads of stuff.
Yeah. Sorry, go on, Scott.
It's funny when I missed your exact wording. You said something like "we hate the past," and here's an observation that I've made sort of regarding I don't know if it's climate change, but let's say energy usage. In my neighborhood where I live, or in the town where I live, you have to pay a tax penalty based on how much concrete's in your driveway, because I guess that has to do with with how water is rushed, which is fine. But then what is not allowed in my neighborhood are clotheslines to dry your clothes. It's against the regulations. You cannot have a clothesline to dry your clothes. But talk about hating the past. I mean, look at a simple, effective technology, bulletproof, been used for thousands of years, probably, as a way to dry clothes. In a clothes dryer, I mean, it's I don't have to launch a study to have a sense of something's going to consume a lot of electricity, and so it's hard for me to get too interested in these. Let's measure your concrete and really assess, make you pay taxes for the amount of water runoff you're responsible for, when you literally will not let me use the humble clothesline, which I have a hard time believing that would not have a much bigger impact on energy usage, just to allow, if you allow thousands, tens of thousands, 100,000 people to use clotheslines. So I was inspired by your comment, we hate the past, but Gerry, what do you think's behind that? I mean, so we have these simple solutions, we sort of rule them out, but yet we pursue these very high-tech AI solutions for which may have promise, but certainly it's hard to take them seriously as a consumer when you watch the simple ones ignored. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, well, I think that's a great example, Scott. And probably you're not allowed to have clotheslines because it's not pretty or something, or
right,
or some supercilious reason in the pro. I think, Scott, we are inherently inbuilt to believe in gods, and technology is a new god. It's a new thing that's going to solve things for us, or lead us to, a better place, or create miracles of our lives. And we've got caught up in all that belief in this thing, and the sense of constant progress. And we were selling our house recently, and we're moving country as well. We're moving from Ireland to Spain to semi-retire. And my sister's about 13 years older than me. She's a reasonable amount older than me. And I was just talking to her as we're moving. I was saying, "Oh, we're giving everything away to our cousins and nieces and everything like that." And I said to her at one stage, "Oh, and we don't want to waste anything." And she almost had a heart attack. Like, she said, "No, you couldn't waste anything." We grew up in a small farm, and the idea of waste was like, it was a sin. It was everything was reused, everything was got, and like I didn't want to waste, but she was like shocked that I'd even say for a moment that we were going to throw something out in the process. And that these people we look down on, these are old fogies, or these are not modern people. Like my sister would not be on the cover of any forward progressive magazine, yet she's doing her type of lifestyle is a vastly better lifestyle from a sustainable point of view for a future of the human race than my lifestyle has certainly been over the years. I think I've learned quite late of these things like like clotheslines and that the basics, that there's a lot of it is, I think a lot of the solutions is actually non-technological, that walking, cycling, clotheslines, that there's a lot of capacity either in our own human energy or in energy that's in the wind or any, but we're constantly needing to mediate everything through a device, and we don't need to do that.
Yeah, no, it made me think a couple of things. So I think one of the, maybe you'd agree, but and this spans from websites to food to whatever, but somehow there seems to be there's no real price on waste. It doesn't hurt.
No.
Unfortunately, it doesn't hurt. Like the waste, or at least the damage I create vis-a-vis the environment, is not in it. There's no real price on it. Yes, you pay a couple of taxes and so on, but it's not what you actually cause out there. So I think there's something amiss in that sense, and I completely agree with this. There's such a strong hope that technology will solve whatever, and then when you look at the history of technology, at least even in the innovation space, is most of them are flops. Most of them, they come on the market. You try to do a couple of things. I mean, look at the blockchain. It's nice, or it's there for a long time, but nobody really knows what to use it for. So most of the history of technology is a couple of great inventions, but a lot of it didn't work. Just didn't catch on, didn't hang on.
And even, Jan, what works, the problem with modern technology or energetic technology is that even that which is efficient creates more use. So we may double the efficiency, but we treble the use. So I'm not sure there is a technological invention that has actually reduced energy consumption. It just,
even though the machine gets more efficient, it probably also gets cheaper by the same token, and then of course then two people use it or three people use it, so that expands the footprint overall.
So the energy consumption, I think energy consumption has doubled since the 70s, and is likely to double again over the next 30 or 40 years. So it's not an energy production problem we have, it's an energy consumption one. And I think Scott's example is a great example. Dry your clothes in the sun. There's so many, like I saw a study of US households which said that 20% of electricity was wasted with what was called vampire power, with basically devices that were always on but not being used. 20% of electricity in the process. So and as you said, there's no cost. I talked to a designer with a really great phone. I don't know if you've heard of them, called Fairphone, which is a modular designed phone. So one of the designers there, and she was saying the number one issue she sees in a challenge to modern economies is what you articulated there, Jan. We don't properly account for the entire cost of the product, from its manufacturing, which includes its mining, which includes its waste. I mean, the amount we dig out of the earth 100 billion tons of material every year, and 90 billion tons of that immediately goes into a tailings dump or a whatever. So 90 billion tons is immediately, and most of that waste is toxic. So we don't account for that, and we don't look after that properly. And then the products that they're speeding up with planned obsolescence, certainly in the electronics industry, less than 20% of electronics are properly recycled. And properly, even about 70% of electronics are recycled. And of that 70% of recycling that occurs, we're lucky if we get back 30% of the materials.
Yeah.
So we're talking probably about 6-7% of material recycling for electronics. And we're now creating 50 million tons of electronics waste every year, enough to build a Great Wall of China. Every year, and it's going to double in another 6 years. So we've got this incredible waste tsunami. Look at plastic. Amazon creates enough bubble wrap to smother the earth 5 times every year, to wrap around the entire globe every year. And there's no cost to that waste. Nobody's getting really charged for it. And so we need a radical new accounting model that gives a true and total cost of our activities to the entire ecosystem rather than just to a particular company or localized economy.
I'm now wondering about maybe 2 things. So the fact that you care so much about this environmental aspect, and especially of all the things, but also in the digital world, does that somehow that came out of TopTask itself, or is that a kind of an additional thing?
Yeah, well, when I look back, and we're always great rationalizers, they say. I heard a great quote once that says, "Humans are not rational animals. Humans are rationalizing animals." So I'd like to think that there was a connection, but I mean, about 4 or 5 years ago, I was watching, the young people demonstration, Greta Thunberg or whatever, Fridays for the Future, and I thought, here's these idealized, young people trying to save the planet. I wonder, is there something I could do? And I really thought there wasn't much. I thought, I'm working in digital, it's great and everything like that. But then as I researched, and the more I thought, it always is in the back of my head of the huge quantity of content waste. I remember once having a conversation with a senior person in Microsoft, and he said, this is back years ago, he said, Microsoft had 15 million pages at that stage on Microsoft.com. And he said 4 million of them had never been visited. Nobody had ever gone to them. And I thought, wow, that's the population of Ireland of pages that nobody has ever visited, and why? And when you think of, it's not just the cost of publishing that page, but the cost of creating it, the amount of meetings that go into, creating that particular content. So I was very aware of, going into organizations, and after we deleted 80 to 90% of the website, it worked better, or the internet. It worked.
That sinks in. 80 to 90% of the content.
Yeah. I remember once working in the IKEA intranet, and there was something like 500, or not IKEA, Tetra Pak. We did some work with IKEA over the years as well, but Tetra Pak. They had like 500,000 pages, and we, in one movement, it wasn't the fun. We got rid of 400,000, and nobody noticed. In the project, they actually had a team. They hired a team of a support team. I don't know, was there 3 or 5 or 6 people in it, because they were terrified about the idea of deleting all this stuff. But we had the evidence that nobody was looking at it, et cetera, in the process. So they hired a team to deal with all the negative feedback that they would get. And they let go of the team on the first morning at lunchtime, because they didn't get a single call, for the 400,000 pages in the and I could tell you the same for the U.S. Department of Health, for University of Southampton did a recent study, and something like 95% of their content was not being visited. So that was a connection. I didn't see it at that time. I wasn't talking about environmentalism or sustainability. I was just saying, this is crazy. Like, why are we producing all this sort of stuff? And we can't maintain these websites. We can't, look after them. And I just felt it was not a very sensible thing to be doing. But I didn't see the environmental element of it. Looking back, I can see how, like in Ireland at the moment, Ireland is a big tech centre, and data centres are taking up 14% of Irish electricity. 14%. All of rural Ireland is 12%. All of rural Ireland, all the households and the shops in rural Ireland is 12%. Data centres are 14%. And 90% of that is not a data centre, it's a data dump.
Yeah.
So, and data is growing at such, I think we're going to hit a big data crisis within the next 5 years. It is growing at an unbelievable rate. And most of it is not of a quality.
So I have a question relating to this. I find that the parallel between, shall we call it content creep and feature creep, I find that a very interesting parallel. I had never really noticed that before. And my question to you is, why do you think that happens fundamentally? I mean, why is it that it's easier to add stuff than to actually take stuff away?
Yeah, well, adding requires a lot less wisdom or intelligence than taking away. And I was in one of the biggest software companies in the world once, and with one of their top products. And I heard a bunch of senior people deciding about a new feature. And the decision process was basically, the competitor has it.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, that was it. The competitor has it. We need it. And I said, why do you need it? When I asked them why did they need, they looked at me as if I had two heads. Why are they asking such a stupid question? The competitor has it. But I remember over the years, I used to do a lot of work for councils and municipalities around top tasks. There was, you could see council websites, older council websites, they don't have it now. They were extremely difficult to navigate because there was 4 or 5 different types of navigation on the page. And the more I got into understanding the history of these websites, the more I understood why there was all these different types of navigation. So there was this navigation on the left, which was a kind of a clunky attempt in 1999 to develop an overall architecture for all of local government content. And it was badly thought out and was badly used, but it got implemented. And basically people said in the councils, this isn't working. Right? People can't find stuff, but can't take it away. Like it's not working, but we can't take it away. So they added sections like most popular or whatever. And so then they'd have the navigation, and there's another navigation called most popular. So what the other navigation on the left, that was unpopular or something like that. And then there was a new government initiative called Do It Online, which had a kind of a different navigation approach, which was like find, pay, it had a verb-based navigation, and that became pushed for that was a big senior man, new government came in, wanted to do something. So then that got onto the website. But did they take away the other two? No. So now you had 3 different forms of navigation. Then another government came in says, these websites are a total mess, these local government, let's fix the problem. They added a 4th form of navigation onto the website. Nobody ever took, because, we can't take it away because it's connected or linked to other things. And so it's very easy to add. And you won't get shot for adding, but the fear of removing, it takes real courage to extricate. So you see in most intranets, you'll see data management or document storage systems. You'll see multiple versions of them, or you'll see multiple versions of training system. Well, that training system didn't work, but it worked for this tiny fraction of training, and it's popular for that. So we're not going to remove it for just that tiny bit of training. And then over a period, you got 5 or 6 different training systems, and people are stopping people in the corridor asking which training should you go to in the process. So it takes real intelligence and hard work and be willing to defend and be willing to take initial negative response from certain actors if you remove something. But you can launch something or, add something, and nobody's really going to attack you in the process. So adding and launching is a path to, and that's how you actually progress your career. I mean, you don't go into the next meeting for the new management system and say, well, I took away a content management system. That's not going to get you the next job. I launched a new content management system. Nobody's going to look at you at the next job and say, I took away 5 features. All they want to know about is the features that you added.
Gerry, I relate so much to what you're saying. It's like I'm running out of notes on my little pad. There's a lot less risk to adding in there. I mean, personal, like maybe corporate risk is different, but just me as an individual, if I say, let's add this, okay, the worst thing happens is nobody uses it. But if I say, let's take this away, then I'm like personally, I've made a case for it against all this energy to this inertia to maintain it. So now I've taken personal risk to get rid of it, and at what benefit? It's funny. So I'll tell you this one example. It's a great lesson for product managers, managing features on products. And I'll give you one quick example. When I was a product manager with John Deere with compact tractors, and I often feel like one of the things that is underrated that I did was some things that never saw the light of day. One was a gasoline or you're a petrol powered tractor. There was tremendous executives. They wanted to add this gasoline powered option, which would have been very costly from lots of perspectives. And nobody wanted it. And it was adding to the SKUs and it was adding to this. And I was like, if they add this thing, they'll never get rid of it, And so nobody ever cares. I never got a pat on the back I literally laid down, not literally, I figuratively laid down on the path to stop that model from ever seeing the light of day. And then, like you say, nobody cares. It's been 12 years, nobody cares. But I feel like that was one of the best things I ever did for them, something that absolutely nobody cares about. In fact, I made a lot of people angry at the time. They didn't appreciate me preventing that.
And connected with that, Scott, I remember having a conversation with a product manager, and he said, if I remove this feature, that's 2 jobs. Mm-hmm. They're all, certainly in bigger software environments, features are often little teams. And, in all likelihood, they'll get repositioned or whatever. But when you remove a feature, you're affecting people in the process. That's what you did in stopping that. And would that we could develop more wisdom as a species. I think we've lost wisdom, and I know it sounds like a foggy word but I think we need far more wisdom than innovation.
I feel what's difficult about this is it seems to me that this is some kind of fundamental law somehow, a bit like, I don't know if you know Zipf's law, this idea that you find power laws everywhere, and they just pop up everywhere. And I get the feeling this thing that it's easier to add than subtract you find this everywhere. You find this in law, and government making laws. It's very easy to add laws. It's very difficult to take them away, as we mentioned, in features, in content. And I mean, I used to edit films, and I often, clients would tell me, if you make something shorter, it should cost less, right? But actually, it's really difficult to get something short. It's actually much more work, to get the same, let's say, effectiveness in a more efficient way is actually a lot of work. And I do wonder where this comes from. I would suspect there's some kind of game theoretic thing going on underneath that. As you talked about the different costs, how the cost to the individual is much bigger if you take something away. But if you add something, basically the cost is spread out to the whole organization. So I think these are very tricky problems to handle.
Yeah, they definitely are. And I'm sure there's an underlying law. And I think I think part of it is down to evolution as well, that, you know, we were, for most of us, as our existence as a species for hundreds of thousands of years, we were used to scarcity. And, you know, once we saw fruits or something like that, we grabbed them, and the idea that we would have too much would have been, you know, a strange idea. And I think we're not able to deal with abundance. And that's, you know, that's a core challenge. But even you see it in DNA, like a lot of, you know, the DNA is so-called, well, we don't know what it does, or, you know, in the process. Can we overcome this? Because we need to, you know, because this more costs energy. You know, this little bit of extra storage, it begins to add up. Because the constant debate when I say, you know, but the content, you know, people keep coming back to me and saying, yeah, but gigabytes has no consequence. Store as much as you want, you know, and that it's just as cheap to store 10 gigabytes as 100 gigabytes. And in some technical environments is, because systems tend to scale in blocks of, you know, of environments. But, you know, when you take that all outwards and you get to 14% of Irish electricity, then you realize, yeah, all of those little ones adding up are in other countries. And, you know, and it's not just the electricity. You know, a typical data center can consume 1 million liters of water a day. And they cycle through hardware at an extraordinary rate. Every 2 or 3 years, servers are changed. To manufacture a server is between 1 and 2 ton of CO2. A lot of digital waste is actually hitting in the manufacturing process. So we have this so-called cloud-based. The cloud has made it worse. So we've got worse. We've got a lot worse. You know, I went back in the 90s, in the mid-90s, and involved in the web. We'd been sitting around, how can we get 5 bytes out of this image? Because it was going down a telephone line or whatever, the web page. You know, you had to be really focused and write clean HTML. And now we send down, you know, 300 kilobytes of CSS when we only need 10. The page only uses 10, but it's just as easy to send the whole package down. And, you know, so we've got an average of 5 megabyte pages in weight, when you only 800 kilobyte is actually working for that page. And that convenience that's all leading us to that culture of, you know, just throwing things away, and we have to change that culture.
I think what really resonated, you said we're not built to deal with abundance. I think that makes a lot of sense. It reminds me, I don't know if you've ever seen any of these survival shows, like Alone. You ever seen that, where you're on an island by yourself? Well, in those circumstances, like if you find a plastic bottle or a can or a large nail, like anything you find, you don't get rid of, like, because you have to find, because you have true scarcity. You have so little that you can make usefulness. You need to try to make usefulness out of any piece of trash or that you find. And surely back in our lizard brains, there was a time where that made a lot of sense. And if you killed an animal, you need to use every single bit of it. If you plant a plant, you know, or, you know, you're going to turn however your farming practices you're going to try to use every possible thing you can. And so it's like literally we're wired that way, and we don't. And so now we're in this environment where we have abundance. It's like our programming is. We're still in our minds. We're on that island by ourselves, and we have to collect all our plastic bottles.
And I mean, let's be honest. Abundance is very enjoyable for maybe only a certain limit of time, but having things available and not having to care, and you can just, I mean, that's
stimulating. It is, but it's like, Jan, it's how you started this. It's the pub and the alcoholic for the first week.
Yeah,
you know,
like somewhere along the line, there's going to be issues. But
there's going to be issues. There's going to be, you know, but it's the first couple of days, it's publish, publish, publish. It's happy times, you know.
Yeah.
Times are great, but they don't last because our abundance costs the earth and costs the ecosystem, you know, and these are the consequences. We are reaching the limits of our wasteful behavior.
But I would argue it also costs us on a psychological level. I read a really interesting book by he's a German, I think, philosopher, but of Korean origin, called Byung-Chul Han, and he wrote this book called The Burnout Society, and the whole premise of the book is that so Freud was talking about neurosis, and that neurosis stems from a negative pushback from society. So we can't do things. So we would like to do something, but we can't. And that today this has now completely changed. And relating to this notion of abundance, we are living in a society of positivity where it's our the challenge for everyone is to basically put limits on what you want to do and be able to say no to things, and I won't do this. He was arguing that this has also a psychological effect on people.
Yeah.
And actually, I wanted to ask you in this case, what, in your opinion, then is the meaning of innovation? Because we've been talking about going back, and so the typical idea we have when we talk about innovation is that it's something new. What would your thoughts be around that?
Yeah, I suppose it would be like that, Jonathan, that it's something new and it's something nearly always technological. Like when we tend to talk, or when I hear talk about innovation, it's often technological rather than social. So you wouldn't necessarily hear that the 15-minute city or people being able to get to everything, you know, on foot is innovation. You know, it's innovation is the electric vehicle, but the concept of, you know, social collaboration, you know, and is not necessarily seen as innovation. So I think innovation, in my experience, has been very much locked into technological gadgetry and technological development. And so it would be, new that is technological. That would be my immediate understanding of innovation.
Yeah, but I mean, there is so much that is in there. I think it's also, there is this very strong bias towards technology first innovation, and the work, at least I do, and I think here we are all aligned also with Scott, is that we try to kind of change the way how this is perceived. So because if you start out with technology, and that's most of the work that, honestly, if I look at the project that we've been doing, is not creating a new idea or bringing some new idea into a company. The struggle they have is, here's a list of 200 different ideas that we have, and we have no clue which one we should actually work on. So I think they because they're so technology focused, because they are so feature focused, or however you want to call this, they end up exactly building that pile of stuff. And the struggle then is how can you prioritize it? At one point it's no longer manageable, as you say. You completely lose, and then in the worst case, the team changes, and then you add another couple of features with new teams, and it goes on and on and on without actually having that focus. So how can we bring this back? I mean, I think we all kind of agree what the problem is, but how do you focus it back? How can you bring it back onto the things that really matter?
Yeah.
How do you figure this out?
Well, maybe I talk a little bit about top tasks in that context, because that's the method I've used for addressing that problem you've just articulated in there. And so, it's the basic understanding that there's stuff that matters and there's stuff that doesn't matter so much. And I say there's top tasks and there's tiny tasks. Yeah. And when a tiny task goes to sleep at night, it dreams of being a top task.
That's so beautiful.
So a lot of the products team or whatever is going to be dealing with the tiny tasks, because the tiny tasks are ambitious. They know they're tiny, but they believe that if they somehow get higher in the architecture and the agenda, people will love them and they will become top tasks. So remember years and years ago, we back around 2009, we did a top task project with Cisco, and the number one task was software. Two types of software download: engineering software download for firmwares and updates and stuff. Because most people who come to Cisco are engineers, they're network engineers. Hundreds of thousands of network engineers constantly maintaining systems, upgrading those systems. But another type of software download was more promotional trials and all that sort of stuff. And so we said, the data came out. We drew up all the stuff that network engineers might want to do, from troubleshooting to, and network engineers and other people who use the website, like pricing and installation and configuration guides and all the stuff that people needed to do if they were purchasing or managing a network or routers or those sorts of systems. And very much, it wasn't a super task. So what I would call a super task is like a book of flight or a book of room. It's a task that is just way more dominant than everything else in the structure. But it wasn't quite a super task, but it was very, very much number one in the process. And so we said, and what about downloads? Oh, we've dealt with that. That's I know everyone wants to do that. Yeah. So does everyone agree? Yeah, that's really important, but it's not what I want to talk about. It's not what I want to focus on, right? So nobody had done anything in downloading software for the previous 4 or 5 years, and so the next step in top tasks is to ask the question: well, how is this top? We've established the top task. So basically, there was 4 tasks. So there's about 80 tasks in the environment. It's typically in any environment, whether it's WHO for COVID, about somewhere between 50 and 80 tasks will define anything. Any sort of.
And just maybe for clarity's sake, like tasks in your sense are stuff that people want to do.
So okay. And people often say, "Oh, is that a verb?" Oftentimes, verbs are not good from an architectural point of view. With navigate, because verbs are find and get. So you don't need to say find pricing. So pricing is a task. Of course, pricing is a whole range of tasks. Configuration, stuff that people need to do. People that are coming, to a website are coming with a purpose, and there's these common purposes. So I need, as a network engineer, I need to find out if there's a latest version of the RV/over2 firmware. And if there is, I need to download it because I've got a bunch of RV/over2 routers and I need to upgrade them. I'm working because a lot in Cisco is mediated through partners. So they've got partners who look after end customers in the process. So these partners are constantly doing loads of upgrading and maintenance in the process. So software is a macro task. So you say, because when you say that to a network, if you say it to a bunch of marketing people, what are you talking about? But that's not really a task. But you say it to a network engineer, then immediately, that's downloading. So, so it's this thing that I really need to do. The reason I'm here in the process. So software, pricing, configuration, troubleshooting, stuff that I need to do. I need to find out. I need to, weather. Today is like you're at a weather website, not looking for information. You're looking for the weather.
Yeah.
Or will it be sunny? Do I need, So
you're looking for another blog post about, I don't know.
No, yeah, absolutely. Doesn't it drive you mad when you go to a menu website and they talk about what a horrible night they had last night, or their cousin called? I just want the menu for this cake. I don't want the history of your troubles with your spouse and that you've got 4 children and that the color of your diet. Just please give me the menu, or the recipe in the process. So the next step in Top Task is say, okay, so, but nobody wanted to talk about it. They want to immediately go to all the other stuff that was down at the bottom. But we held them feet to the fire a bit and says, well, what's software like? What's it like for downloading firmware, and download? And then, well, I don't know, I'm not sure. Well, God, who has asked that question in the last 4 years? Or, so we created some studies around the top tasks, such as download the latest version. So we came up with a bunch of instructions based on the software top tasks that were reflective of typical things that network engineers would need to do when they were downloading software. And so we did a type of usability study where we observed like a time and motion, a combination of a time and motion and a usability study. And most of them can be done with this sort of system, screen sharing. We were doing this back in 2009 with WebEx or whatever, GoToMeeting. So there's different systems. So you just observe, you give the network engineer a task and then leave them alone, see how they went through it. And basically, we've got about 15 or 20 network engineers to do it. And we were able to show Cisco that it was a horrendous process. It was 15 steps to download a piece of firmware, and it took about 400 seconds. So it was horrendous. And it had contained all sorts of things, like step 7 was something to do with Internet 5 or Internet Explorer 6 that had a quirk in it and you couldn't. So, but it was not, we were now at I don't know what number, but we no longer needed step 6. But nobody had ever got rid of step 6 in the browser. So you still had to say, do you have JavaScript on your browser? Or, when now browsers were able to automatically see it. Or so it was this classic collection of stuff that the download software had been designed probably in 1995, and it had just been added to it.
That concludes part 1 of our discussion with Gerry McGovern, author of Top Tasks. Check out part 2 in our next episode, where we get into the practical details of Gerry's method. Send any thoughts to us at productquestpodcast@gmail.com, and we will see you next time.